I am Nadine. And I never imagined my mother's text would arrive at the exact moment my daughter Marlo placed the last hand-folded napkin beside the 20th plate. The dining room table we'd extended with a folding card table, covered in her great-grandmother's lace tablecloth, practically glowed under the string lights she'd spent 3 hours hanging. My phone buzzed against the kitchen counter, and something in my gut twisted before I even looked at the screen. But before I tell you how 20 teenagers' lives changed because of one canceled birthday party, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe. You'll want to see how this ends. My mother Beverly's text was classic her. No greeting, no warmth, just surgical precision. Change of plans. Grandfather's club has availability. We'll celebrate Marlo there instead. Your father and I won't be coming to your little gathering. The Weatherbys will be at the club. You remember their son Preston? Harvard Law, single. I stood there, flowers still dusting my hands from helping Marlo with her from-scratch dinner rolls, reading those words while my 13-year-old daughter literally danced between the dining room and kitchen, checking her handwritten place cards one more time. She'd spent 3 weeks planning this feast. Not just planning, but preparing, learning recipes from YouTube, practicing her knife skills, all because she wanted to cook for the kids everyone else overlooked. "Mom, do you think Silas will actually come?" Marlo asked, adjusting a fork. "I know he said yes, but people don't usually invite him to things." Silas was the kid who ate lunch alone, who wore the same hoodie every day, who'd smiled so wide when Marlo invited him that his eyes actually teared up. Just like Daphne with her secondhand clothes and fierce poetry, or Tobias, who spent more time in the library than anyone thought healthy. These weren't the shiny, polished kids my parents would approve of. These were the ones who knew what it felt like to be unseen. My parents, Beverly and Warren Hutchinson, had built their entire lives on being seen by the right people. Country club memberships, charity galas where they wrote checks but never got their hands dirty, a house that looked like a magazine spread but felt like a museum. They'd raised me and my brother Prescott to be accessories to their lifestyle, and while he'd fallen perfectly in line, law degree, suitable wife, house in the right neighborhood, I'd become their great disappointment, a high school counselor. That's what I'd chosen, and to them, it was like I'd chosen to be invisible. "Anyone can teach teenagers," my mother had said when I'd told them about my master's degree in counseling. "But not everyone can marry well, Nadine. You're not getting any younger." They'd never understood why I spent my evenings running support groups for kids with anxiety, why I kept granola bars and clean socks in my office for students who needed them, why I celebrated when kids like Silas managed to make it through a whole week of school. To them, success was measured in salary brackets and social connections, not in the moment a kid finally believed they were worth something. "Marlo, honey," I started, but she was already racing back to the kitchen, her handmade apron, sewn in home ec class, fluttering behind her. "The roast should be perfect by 6:30, and I have vegetarian options for Luna and Wesley. Oh, and I made sure nothing has nuts because of Kai's allergy. Do you think 20 portions of dessert will be enough? I made extra just in case." My beautiful, generous daughter had inherited exactly none of my parents' values and all of my grandmother's heart. The same grandmother who'd raised me for 3 crucial years when my parents were establishing themselves professionally, the woman who taught me that the best meals were the ones where everyone felt welcome at the table. I looked at my phone again, at my mother's casual dismissal of everything Marlo had worked for, everything she'd poured her young heart into. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just about a birthday dinner. This was about everything. 20 years of these moments flooded back as I stood there, still holding my phone like it might apologize for what it had delivered. 20 years of watching my parents polish their image while tarnishing their children's spirits. Well, one of their children's spirits. Prescott had been perfectly content to be molded into their vision. I remember being 8 years old, coming home with a certificate declaring me most helpful student in Mrs. Garrett's 3rd grade class. I'd spent every recess helping Emmeline, the new girl from Romania who barely spoke English, learn to read. My parents barely glanced at the certificate before my mother said, "That's nice, dear, Prescott. Show your sister your debate trophy. Prescott's trophy was massive, gold-plated, important-looking. He'd won some junior debate competition arguing about fiscal responsibility, at age 11. My father actually stood up from his Wall Street Journal to shake Prescott's hand, man to man. My little certificate got stuck to the refrigerator with a magnet, advertising our dentist, and disappeared within a week. By high school, the pattern was carved in stone. I'd started a peer tutoring program that helped 40 struggling students pass their classes. The local newspaper even did a little feature on it, with my picture and everything. That same week, Prescott got into Yale for pre-law. Guess which achievement got a dinner party at the country club? Why do you insist on surrounding yourself with losers? My mother had asked when she found out I was spending Friday nights tutoring kids from the trailer park instead of attending Preston Weatherby's pool parties. You're pretty enough, Nadine. You could date someone like Preston, but not if you keep acting like some sort of social worker. The way she said social worker made it sound like a contagious disease. College was when I finally stopped trying to earn their approval. While Prescott was joining the right fraternity and networking with future senators' sons, I was volunteering at a youth shelter and changing my major from business to psychology. The day I told them, my father actually laughed. Psychology? What? You're going to be one of those people who asks everyone about their feelings? How much does that pay exactly? It's not about the money, Dad. It's about helping kids who... Everything is about money, Nadine. Everything. How do you think we gave you this life? How do you think you got to go to college without loans? The irony was that they'd paid for an education that taught me to see through their entire worldview. Every psychology class, every sociology seminar, every practicum at underfunded schools showed me exactly what my parents had spent their lives avoiding. That real worth had nothing to do with bank accounts or country club membership. When I graduated with honors and got accepted into a top counseling program, they didn't come to my graduation. Prescott was closing his first big legal case that weekend, and that was the priority. I walked across that stage to receive my diploma, and the only family in the audience was my grandmother Rose, my mother's mother, who'd driven 6 hours despite her arthritis. "You're doing the right thing, sweet pea," Grandma Rose had whispered afterward, pressing a small wrapped box into my hands. Inside was her own mother's cameo brooch and a note, "For my granddaughter who sees the value in every soul." My wedding to Marcus should have been their moment of triumph. He was a successful architect from a good family, but they spent the entire engagement trying to convince him I'd be better as a trophy wife than a high school counselor. When that failed, and when Marcus made it clear he'd fallen in love with me specifically because of my passion for helping kids, they scaled back their involvement to the bare minimum. Prescott was my mother's escort down the aisle. My father gave a toast that was more about his own business success than about Marcus and me. But the real break, the moment I understood I'd never be their daughter the way they wanted, came when Marlo was born. I'd just spent 36 hours in labor. Marcus was crying with joy, and my mother's first words when she held her granddaughter were, "Well, at least she got Marcus's nose. We can work with that. We can work with that." Like my baby was a fixer-upper property instead of a miracle. That's when I made a promise, holding my hours-old daughter while my parents discussed which preschools would look best on her future college applications. I promised Marlo would never, ever have to earn love by being anything other than exactly who she was. 13 years of keeping that promise had led us here. To this dining room that looked nothing like the formal chambers where I'd choked down silent dinners as a child. Marcus and I had divorced when Marlo was 7, amicably, because he'd gotten a job offer in Seattle he couldn't refuse, and we both knew our love had evolved into friendship. But we'd stayed united in one thing. Marlo would grow up knowing she was loved for her heart, not her achievements. From the time she could walk, I made sure Marlo saw the world differently than I'd been taught to see it. Where my parents had driven past homeless people with locked doors and averted eyes, I stopped to buy sandwiches and sat with Marlo while we handed them out. She was 3 when she asked why that man was sleeping outside, and I told her the truth. That sometimes life is hard and people need help, and that every person deserves kindness. But Grandma Beverly says we don't talk to those people, she'd said, her little forehead wrinkled with confusion. Grandma Beverly is wrong about that, sweetheart. We talk to everyone who needs a friend. By 5, Marlo was helping me sort donations at the shelter where I volunteered. By 7, she was reading picture books to younger kids at the community center's after-school program. But it wasn't just about service. It was about seeing people, really seeing them. When her classmate Bethany came to school with the same unwashed clothes 3 days in a row, Marlo didn't whisper and point like the other kids. She quietly asked if Bethany wanted to come over and play, then helped me pack an extra bag of clothes that just happened to not fit Marlo anymore. The private school my parents insisted on paying for, our granddaughter will not go to public school, became an unexpected classroom in empathy. Marlo saw the kids who had everything but felt nothing, the ones who threw $100 bills around but were starving for authentic connection. She made friends with the scholarship kids, the ones whose parents worked 3 jobs to afford even partial tuition. "Mom, why does Carter's dad yell at him for getting a 93 on his math test?" she asked one day after school. "I saw him crying in the bathroom." "Because some people think love has to be earned with perfection, baby. But that's not how real love works." She'd nodded solemnly, then asked if Carter could come to our Wednesday night dinner. That became a thing. Wednesday night dinners where any kid who needed a home-cooked meal and adults who actually listened could show up. Our little apartment became a refuge. Marcus joined us when he was in town, bringing his terrible dad jokes and genuine interest in every kid's story. My parents, predictably, were horrified. "You're turning our granddaughter into a bleeding heart," my father had snapped when he found out about our Wednesday dinners. "She should be focusing on her studies, her future, not feeding every stray that—" "They're not strays, Dad. They're children, human beings, Marlo's friends." "Friends? That Gonzalez boy's father is a janitor. What could Marlo possibly have in common with?" I'd hung up on him. It was getting easier every time. But here's what my parents never understood. Marlo wasn't suffering from her empathy. She was thriving. Her teachers constantly remarked on her emotional intelligence, her ability to bring people together, her natural leadership. When the school needed someone to head the anti-bullying campaign, they asked Marlo. When new students arrived, she was the designated welcome buddy. She didn't have the most friends. She had the truest friends. And she was happy. God, she was so happy. She sang in the shower, danced while doing homework, laughed with her whole body. She knew who she was and liked that person. Do you know how rare that is for a 13-year-old? Do you know how many kids I counsel who would give anything to feel that comfortable in their own skin? The birthday feast she'd planned wasn't just a party. It was Marlo's manifesto, her declaration of values. She'd specifically invited 20 kids who rarely got invited anywhere. Kids who ate alone, who walked the halls like ghosts, who believed the lie that they didn't matter. She'd spent her own saved money on ingredients, learned recipes that would accommodate every dietary need and restriction, hand-lettered place cards with each person's name and a personal message. "I want them to know someone sees them," she'd told me last week, practicing how to julienne carrots. Really sees them. My grandmother Rose would have been so proud. She died when Marlo was 10, but not before passing on her recipes and her philosophy. The best tables are the ones with mismatched chairs and matched hearts. Standing in my kitchen, still clutching my phone with my mother's dismissive text, I watched Marlo through the doorway as she lit the tea candles she'd bought with her babysitting money. The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents had just canceled on their granddaughter's birthday to go to the exact country club where they'd tried to hold her 5th birthday party. That disaster had ended with Marlo crying because she wasn't allowed to invite her friend Destiny, whose mother cleaned houses for a living. "Those people would be uncomfortable at the club, Nadine," my mother had said, as if discomfort was contagious. Now, 8 years later, they were doing it again. But this time the stakes felt higher. This wasn't just about a party. Marlo had specifically chosen this Friday night because she knew my parents' standing dinner reservation at the club was on Saturdays. She'd worked around their schedule, accommodated their preferences, even made sure to include foods she thought they'd enjoy just in case they decided to come. "I know Grandma Beverly probably won't eat my cooking," she'd said last week while testing her mushroom Wellington recipe, "but maybe if I make something fancy enough." I hadn't had the heart to tell her that nothing would ever be fancy enough for Beverly Hutchinson if it came from the wrong zip code or was served to the wrong people. The past month had been a delicate dance of trying to prepare Marlo for disappointment while not crushing her hope. My parents had been non-committal about attending from the start, throwing out phrases like, "we'll see" and "perhaps," with the same tone they used for dental appointments. But Marlo had interpreted their vagueness as possibility. Grandpa Warren asked what time dinner was, she'd told me excitedly after their last obligatory monthly phone call. "That means they're thinking about it, right?" They'd been thinking about it, all right. Thinking about how to get out of it. I should have seen this coming when my mother called yesterday to ask about the guest list situation. She'd actually used those words, situation, like Marlo's friends were some sort of crisis to be managed. "I assume you've limited it to appropriate families," she'd asked. "Marlo invited the people she wanted to celebrate with, Mom." "Yes, but surely you provided guidance." "The Rodriguez family? Really, Nadine? And that boy with the unusual hair? What will people think?" "What people, Mom? It's a birthday dinner in my apartment, not a debutante ball." Everything is a reflection on the family, Nadine. Everything. The family. Always the family name, the family reputation, the family image, but never the actual family, the granddaughter who'd been practicing her welcome speech in the mirror, who'd saved every penny of her allowance to buy ingredients, who'd watched 17 YouTube videos to learn how to fold napkins into birds because everyone deserves something beautiful at their place setting. My phone buzzed again. Marcus, texting from Seattle. "Flight delayed, but I'll make it. Tell Marlo I'm bringing her favorite cake from that place she loves. Can't wait to meet all her friends. P.S. Your parents coming?" I almost laughed at the question. Marcus had learned years ago to factor my parents' probable absence into any family planning, but he still asked out of some persistent optimism that they might surprise us. They never did. A third text arrived, this one from my brother Prescott. "Heard Mom and Dad are going to the club instead, probably for the best. Avoid the drama, right? BW, Preston Weatherby really is single. Just saying. Avoid the drama. As if the drama wasn't my parents creating a hierarchy of human worth and teaching it to their grandchildren. As if the drama wasn't breaking a 13-year-old's heart because her friends didn't have trust funds." Through the doorway, I watched Marlo step back to admire her handiwork. The apartment, our small, cozy real apartment, looked magical. She'd strung lights across the ceiling, arranged wildflowers from the farmer's market in mason jars, set out the good dishes we'd collected from yard sales and thrift stores. Every fork, every glass, every carefully folded napkin was an act of love. "Mom," she called out, "do you think we should put the bread in now or wait until—" She stopped, seeing my face. "What's wrong?" I had exactly two choices in that moment. I could break her heart now with the truth, or I could let her discover it when her grandparents failed to show up. Neither option would protect her from learning what I'd spent 13 years trying to postpone, that some people's love comes with conditions, with guest lists, with approval requirements that have nothing to do with the size of your heart. But maybe that was the wrong lesson entirely. Maybe the real lesson was what she'd already learned, that you set the table anyway, that you cook with love anyway, that you open your door to the lonely and the overlooked anyway. Maybe the real lesson was that rejection from the wrong people could be a gift. "Nothing's wrong, sweetheart," I lied, sliding my phone into my pocket. "Just checking the time. Should we put the bread in at 6:15? Marlo beamed. "Perfect. That gives it 15 minutes to get golden." She paused, studying me with those perceptive eyes she'd inherited from her father. "Mom, you have your worried face on, the one you get when kids at school are going through stuff." Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Marlo literally bounced. "Someone's early." "Oh, I hope it's not Silas. I wanted to make sure everything was perfect before." But it wasn't Silas, it was Destiny and her mother Carmen, holding a covered dish and a small wrapped present. Carmen worked 3 jobs to keep their tiny apartment, but she'd taken time off to drive her daughter here. Ms. Nadine, Destiny rushed to hug me while Marlo and Carmen embraced. My mom made her special flan even though I told her Marlo was cooking everything. You can never have too much dessert, Carmen said, her tired eyes warm. Thank you for including Destiny, she's been talking about this all week. Mom helped me pick out something special for Marlo, Destiny whispered conspiratorially, and I felt my throat tighten. This woman, who calculated every grocery purchase down to the penny, had helped her daughter buy a birthday gift for mine. As they settled in, helping Marlo with last-minute preparations, my phone buzzed insistently. 3 texts from my mother in rapid succession. The Weatherbys will be at the club at 7. Preston specifically asked about you. Your father has already confirmed with the maître, the private dining room. Obviously you can't bring all those children, just Marlo. Wear something appropriate. Those children. Like they were stray animals Marlo had been feeding instead of human beings she'd chosen to love. More kids started arriving. Tobias with his ever-present stack of books, clutching a handmade card. Luna and her fathers, who'd driven 40 minutes from their side of town because Marlo was one of the few kids who defended their family at school. Kai with his grandmother, who spoke limited English but pressed a small jade pendant into Marlo's hand with tears in her eyes. For good girl, she said simply. Good heart. Each arrival made my phone feel heavier in my pocket. How could I tell these families, these beautiful, generous people, that my parents considered them unsuitable? How could I explain that the grandparents Marlo had set 2 places for at the head of the table thought their granddaughter's friends were beneath notice? By 6:45, 19 of the 20 invited kids had arrived. The apartment hummed with the kind of joy you can't buy or manufacture. Marlo, in her element, was explaining the menu she'd prepared. Everything has a story. The mushroom Wellington is because Tobias is vegetarian but hates when people just give him salad. The empanadas are Carmen's recipe that Destiny taught me. The spring rolls are for Luna because she said they remind her of her grandmother in Vietnam. Every dish was an act of seeing someone, of saying, "You matter to me." My phone rang. My mother, not content with texts, I stepped onto the small balcony, closing the door behind me. Mom, this isn't a good time. Nadine Catherine Hutchinson. She used my full name like a weapon. I have been more than patient with your little rebellion, but this is beyond acceptable. The Weatherbys are expecting us. Do you understand what this could mean for Marlo's future? Preston is very successful and he asked about you specifically. Mom, Marlo is 13. Her future doesn't include Preston Weatherby. Her future includes opportunities, Nadine. Real opportunities, not whatever this is. I could hear the disdain dripping through the phone. Your father is appalled that you would choose those people over family. Those people are Marlo's family, Mom. The family she chose. Family isn't something you choose. Family is blood. Family is standards. Family is showing up, I interrupted. Family is 2 grandparents who care more about their granddaughter's heart than their country club reputation. The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Then, in her iciest voice, "If you insist on this path, Nadine, you're doing it alone. We won't be associated with whatever spectacle you're creating, and don't expect us to clean up the mess when Marlo realizes what you've cost her." What I've cost her? Mom, But the line was dead. My mother had hung up on me. The ultimate Beverly Hutchinson power move. Through the glass door, I watched Marlo laughing as she showed Silas how to light the chafing dishes. She'd saved him the seat next to hers, and he looked like he'd won the lottery. In 10 minutes she'd be looking for her grandparents, wondering why those 2 carefully set places remained empty. I stood on that balcony for another moment, watching my breath cloud in the cool evening air, before squaring my shoulders and going back inside. The warmth and laughter hit me like a physical thing. Wesley was teaching everyone a complicated handshake. Daphne was reciting one of her poems to an entranced audience, and Marlo, my brave, beautiful daughter, was checking the place settings one more time. She looked up as I approached and her smile faltered. "They're not coming, are they?" Sometimes your children see right through you, see past every brave face and forced smile. I couldn't lie to those eyes. No, baby, they're not. The room didn't go silent like in movies. The other kids kept chatting, laughing, unaware that Marlowe's world had just tilted. But I saw it, the way her shoulders dropped, the way her hand trembled as she touched the empty chair where her grandmother should have sat. Did they say why? Her voice was small, so different from the confident host who'd been orchestrating this evening. They had other plans, at the country club. Oh. Just oh. But in that single syllable was years of almost but not quite being enough for them. Years of watching other grandchildren get celebrated while she got assessed. Years of loving people who couldn't love her back the way she needed. Carmen must have sensed something because she appeared at my elbow, reading the situation instantly. Marlo, honey, should we start serving? Everything smells incredible. But Marlo wasn't listening. She was staring at those 2 empty chairs like they were indictments. I watched her face cycle through hurt, confusion, anger, and then something else. Something I recognized because I'd felt it myself at her age. The click of understanding that some people's love would always come with terms and conditions. They think my friends aren't good enough, she said. Not a question. A statement. I couldn't deny it. They don't understand what we see, sweetheart. No. She straightened, and I saw steel in her spine that reminded me of Grandma Rose. They understand perfectly. They just don't care. Silas had noticed something was wrong and hovered nearby, uncertain. Marlo saw him and managed a watery smile. Hey Silas, you want to help me with something? Yeah, of course, anything. She turned to address the room, and her voice was steadier now. Guys, I need to tell you something. My grandparents aren't coming tonight. They decided we weren't important enough. The room did go quiet then. These kids knew rejection intimately. They'd felt it in cafeterias and classrooms, in team selections and party invitations. They recognized it in Marlowe's carefully controlled voice. But you know what? Marlo continued, and now there was fire in her eyes. I made too much food anyway. Like, way too much. And I just remembered, it's Friday night at the Beacon Street shelter. They serve dinner at 7:30. Destiny caught on first. The teen shelter, where they never have enough food for seconds. Exactly. Marlo was fully animated now, her heartbreak transforming into something fierce and purposeful. What if we took half of everything there? We could eat here first, pack up the rest, and show up with a feast for kids who really need it. Kids who won't care if we're wearing the right clothes or know the right people. Marlo, I started, not sure whether to encourage or redirect this impulse born of pain. But Tobias was already nodding. My brother stayed there for 3 months after Dad kicked him out. They do their best, but Friday nights are hard. Lots of kids, not enough donations. We could make plates to go, Luna suggested, like real plates, not just sandwiches. With the fancy napkins, Kai added. Everyone deserves the bird napkins. And just like that, my daughter's heartbreak became a mission. The kids organized with startling efficiency. Some starting to eat and enjoy the meal Marlo had prepared, others finding containers and organizing to-go portions. Marlo grabbed her phone and called the shelter, explaining in her clear, determined voice that she had birthday dinner for 20 that needed sharing. I heard Rashid, the night coordinator, through the speaker. Are you serious? We've got 37 kids tonight and we're looking at PB&J again. You'd be saving my life, Marlo. We'll be there by 7:15, she promised, then looked at her friends. Guys, there are 37 teenagers there who think nobody cares about them. Want to prove them wrong? The cheer that went up could have lifted the roof. And in that moment, watching my daughter transform rejection into revolution, I understood something my parents never would. Real legacy isn't about bloodlines or bank accounts. It's about what you do when life breaks your heart. It's about choosing to love harder, wider, truer, in the face of people who tell you your love is aimed at the wrong targets. Marlo caught my eye across the room, and her smile was radiant through her tears. This is better, Mom. This is what Grandma Rose would have done. Yes, it was. The Beacon Street shelter sat in a part of town my parents pretended didn't exist, wedged between a laundromat that never closed and a church that had seen better days. As our convoy of cars pulled up, Marcus had arrived just in time to help transport food. I watched Marlo through the rearview mirror. She clutched a container of her mushroom Wellington like it was precious cargo, her party dress now covered by the apron she'd refused to take off. "You sure about this, baby?" I asked as we parked. "I've never been more sure about anything, Mom." The shelter's common room smelled like industrial disinfectant and teenage uncertainty. Rashid met us at the door, his eyes widening as kid after kid filed in carrying covered dishes, proper plates, and yes, those carefully folded bird napkins. "Marlo, I don't know what to say." "Say you're hungry," she replied, managing a real smile now. "We made enough for everyone to have seconds, maybe thirds." The shelter kids noticed us immediately. They ranged from maybe 14 to 18, wearing everything from school uniforms to clothes that had clearly been slept in. They watched warily as we invaded their space with our suburban enthusiasm and home-cooked food. I saw the calculations in their eyes. Who were we? What did we want? What was the catch? A girl with purple-streaked hair and defensive shoulders spoke first. "This some kind of church thing? We gotta pray for our supper?" "It's a birthday thing," Marlo said simply. "My birthday, and my grandparents didn't want to eat with my friends, so we brought the party here. If that's okay." The girl, her name tag said Raven, studied Marlo like she was speaking a foreign language. "Your grandparents ditched your birthday? They said my friends weren't suitable." Marlo's voice caught slightly on the word. Something shifted in Raven's expression. "Yeah, I know about not being suitable." The ice broke slowly, carefully. Rashid helped organize the food service, and soon both groups of teenagers were filling plates together. At first, they self-segregated, shelter kids on one side, Marlo's friends on the other. But food has its own magic, especially food made with love. "You made this?" A boy with old eyes in a young face held up an empanada like it was gold. "From scratch?" "My friend Destiny's mom taught me," Marlo said, then pointed. "That's Destiny, her mom Carmen makes the best ones, but these are pretty close. I haven't had homemade anything in." He trailed off, took a bite, and his eyes actually closed. "This tastes like my aunt's. Before I had to leave." The stories came slowly at first, then in a flood. The shelter kids, seeing they weren't being judged, began to share. There was Jaden, kicked out for being gay. Aisha, whose mom chose her new boyfriend over her daughter. Phoenix, who'd aged out of foster care with nowhere to go. Story after story of rejection, abandonment, families who'd decided their children weren't worth fighting for. But Marlo's friends had stories too. Silas talked about eating lunch alone for 3 years before Marlo noticed him. Luna shared how kids tormented her for having 2 dads. Tobias admitted his parents wanted to send him to military school to toughen him up, because he preferred books to basketball. I watched from the doorway as 2 tribes of wounded teenagers recognized each other across the divide of circumstance. The shelter kids stopped seeing privileged suburban children and started seeing fellow survivors. Marlo's friends stopped seeing scary homeless teens and started seeing mirrors of their own isolation. "Your grandparents sound like jerks," Raven told Marlo, who was sitting cross-legged on the floor now, party dress forgotten. "They're not jerks," Marlo said thoughtfully. "They're just scared of anything that doesn't match their picture of how life should look." "My dad was like that," Phoenix offered. "Everything had to be perfect. His perfect son playing perfect football with perfect grades. When I told him I wanted to be a social worker, help kids like me, he said I was choosing poverty." He laughed bitterly. "Guess he was right about the poverty part." "You want to be a social worker?" Marlo leaned forward. "My mom's a counselor. She says it's the hardest, best job in the world." That's when Marcus caught my eye and nodded toward the corner where Kai was teaching shelter kids to fold napkin birds, where Wesley and Jaden were comparing terrible dad jokes, where Daphne was writing down her poetry Instagram so Isha could follow her. The room had transformed from a place of wariness to one of connection. "Hey!" Raven called out suddenly. "It's someone's birthday and we haven't sung." What happened next? 37 shelter kids and 20 suburban teenagers singing happy birthday to my daughter in a homeless shelter dining room broke something open in my chest. Marlo was crying openly now, but they were different tears than earlier. These were tears of recognition, of finding your people in the most unexpected place. As Marlo blew out the single candle Rashid had found and stuck in a piece of cake, someone was recording. I didn't notice at first. Teenagers document everything these days. But Aisha was live streaming on her phone, narrating in a hushed voice. Yo, this girl's grandparents ditched her birthday because her friends weren't rich enough. So she brought her whole feast to us. Look at this. When's the last time anybody looked at us like we mattered? The video captured Marlo hugging Raven, both of them crying. It caught Phoenix teaching Silas a complicated card trick. It showed shelter kids and suburban kids sharing stories, sharing food, sharing the radical recognition that they were all just teenagers trying to figure out where they belonged in a world that kept telling them they weren't enough. My phone started buzzing. I ignored it, too captivated by what was happening, but it kept buzzing, insistent, angry. Finally, I looked. 17 missed calls from my mother, 12 from my father, 43 text messages. The last text from my mother: answer your phone immediately. The Weatherbees are asking where you are. I almost laughed. The Weatherbees. While my daughter was learning that rejection could be transformed into connection, my parents were worried about the Weatherbees. Marcus appeared at my elbow. Your phone's having a seizure. My parents. They're probably having an aneurysm because we stood up Preston Weatherby. Good, he said simply. Look at our girl Nadine. Look what she built from their rejection. He was right. Marlo had created something beautiful from something ugly. She'd taken my parents' dismissal and alchemized it into this. 57 teenagers who'd probably never been in the same room before, finding common ground in their shared humanity. My phone rang again. This time Prescott. What? I answered. Nadine, what the hell are you doing? Mom's having a complete meltdown. Dad's threatening to. Prescott, I'm at a homeless shelter watching your niece feed 37 kids who have no family. What are you doing? I'm trying to do damage control. The Weatherbees. Don't care about the Weatherbees. Goodbye, Prescott. But he kept talking, and what he said next stopped me cold. It's all over social media, Nadine. Whatever you're doing, people are watching. Someone's video is going viral. Mom saw it on Mrs. Patterson's Facebook. Dad's talking about disinheritance. Viral. I found Aisha's live stream, now being shared across platforms. 15,000 views in 20 minutes. The caption: rich girl's grandparents said we weren't good enough for her birthday. She said different. Hatch Marlowe table real family birthday revolution. The comments were pouring in. Stories of rejection, of chosen families, of kids who knew exactly how it felt to be deemed unworthy. But also practical offers. Restaurants wanting to donate food. People asking how to help the shelter. Teens in other cities asking how to create their own Marlowe tables. My phone rang once more. My mother. This time I answered. Nadine Catherine Hutchinson, you have humiliated this family beyond. No, Mom, you humiliated yourselves. You had the chance to celebrate your granddaughter and you chose the country club. You had the chance to see her heart and you chose to see her guest list. You had the chance to be grandparents and you chose to be snobs. How dare you? I'm not done. Right now your granddaughter is being celebrated by thousands of people online. Not because of her last name or her zip code or her trust fund, but because she chose love over judgment. She chose compassion over comfort. She chose to see people you've spent your entire life pretending don't exist. Those people have names, Mom. Jaden, who got kicked out for being gay. Aisha, whose mother chose a man over her own daughter. Phoenix, who wants to be a social worker. Their children, teenagers with no family, and your granddaughter gave them dignity and joy and really good mushroom Wellington. That's her legacy, not your country club membership, not the Weatherby connection, this. The silence stretched. Then, in her coldest voice, if you continue down this path, Nadine, you're no longer part of the family? Mom, I haven't been part of your family since I was 8 years old and you threw away my certificate. But I have a family, a real one. And right now it includes 57 teenagers who understand that love isn't about meeting someone's standards, it's about setting a bigger table. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, but my heart was steady. Across the room, Marlo caught my eye. She was sandwiched between Raven and Destiny, all three of them laughing at something on Raven's phone. She looked free. Free from the weight of trying to earn love that came with conditions. You okay? Marcus asked softly. Yeah, I just officially uninvited myself from the Hutchinson family. Good, you were always too good for them anyway. He paused. Check your phone again. The video had hit 100,000 views. Marlowe table was trending, and my daughter, my brave, generous, rejected daughter, had just changed the world. The next morning, I woke to find Marlowe already in the kitchen, her laptop open on the counter, scrolling through messages with tears streaming down her face. My heart clenched. Had the internet turned cruel overnight? Had my parents found a way to hurt her through the screen? Baby, what's wrong? She looked up, and I realized they were happy tears. Mom, look, just look. The screen showed message after message, teenagers from across the city, across the state, across the country, all asking the same thing: how do we start our own Marlowe's table? This girl in Detroit, Marlowe read, voice shaking, she says her church has a kitchen they never use on Friday nights. She wants to cook for the youth shelter down the street. And this boy in Tucson, his whole football team wants to help. They're tired of being told volunteering is soft, and look. She clicked another message. A culinary arts class in Boston wants to make it their semester project. Marcus had stayed over, sleeping on the couch like old times when we needed to parent together. He appeared with coffee, reading over our shoulders. Marlowe, you realize what you've started here? But it wasn't just messages. Rashid called while we were eating breakfast, if you could call staring at screens in wonder, eating. Marlowe, I've been running this shelter for 6 years. His voice crackled through speakerphone. I've never seen anything like this. We've had 17 food donations since last night. Restaurants, families, a whole soccer team that wants to cook next Friday. Can we make this real? That's when Destiny's mom Carmen called. Then Luna's father's. Then Tobias's older brother, the one who'd lived at the shelter. Everyone wanted to help make it real. By noon, we had a plan. Or rather, Marlowe had a plan. I just helped with logistics. Every Friday night, a different group would prepare a meal for the shelter. Not charity food, not leftovers, but real dinners made with intention and served with dignity. The kids who cooked would eat with the shelter residents. No divide between giver and receiver, just teenagers sharing a meal. But here's the important part, Marlowe explained to the impromptu organizing committee that had gathered in our living room. It can't be about getting credit or looking good for college applications. It has to be about seeing people. Silas, who hadn't left Marlowe's side since last night, nodded vigorously. No photos without permission. No treating anyone like a project. And we learned names, Raven added. She'd shown up with Phoenix and Jaden, determined to be part of building something that had welcomed them so completely. Everyone who comes to serve learns the names of everyone eating. No feeding the homeless, we're sharing dinner with friends. The first official Marlowe's table happened the next Friday. 30 teenagers from 3 different schools cooked together in the shelter's expanded kitchen, supervised by Carmen and 2 other parents who understood what we were building. The menu was deliberately simple: spaghetti with homemade sauce, salad, garlic bread, and cookies. The point wasn't to impress, it was to connect. I watched from the doorway as suburban kids and shelter kids mingled naturally now, the awkwardness of that first night replaced by genuine friendship. Marlowe had insisted on one rule: everyone sat mixed together. No segregation, no us and them. Your mom's phone is exploding, Marcus murmured, showing me my silenced cell. 57 missed calls from my parents. Prescott had texted, "They're beyond furious, Dad's called the lawyer about the will." I turned the phone off entirely. Let them call their lawyers. Let them clutch their pearls in their purses. While they were defending their fortress of propriety, their granddaughter was teaching a master class in how to build community from scratch. Week after week, it grew. The second Friday, 60 kids cooked and served. The third, it was 90. Churches offered their kitchens. Restaurants donated ingredients. A local news station did a segment, careful to focus on the movement rather than individual kids, respecting the privacy guidelines Marlowe had insisted on. But the real magic was in the small moments. Jaden teaching Marlowe's friend Kai to play guitar, Raven and Daphne starting a poetry workshop, Phoenix getting tutoring from Tobias for his GED. Lines blurring, walls falling, kids who'd been taught to fear each other learning they had more in common than anyone wanted them to know. "You know what's funny?" Marlowe said one night, after the 4th Friday dinner. "Grandma Beverly was right about one thing. Everything is about family. She just had the definition wrong." She was sitting at our kitchen table, writing thank you notes to that week's volunteers. The girl who'd been devastated by her grandparents' rejection had transformed that pain into something revolutionary. Proof that family is about choosing to show up, choosing to see, choosing to love without conditions. They haven't called in 3 days, I told her. I think they're done with us. Marlo looked up, and her smile was radiant. Good, we've got a bigger family now anyway. The bigger family comment proved prophetic when my parents finally broke their silence. Not with a phone call, that would have been too direct for Beverly and Warren Hutchinson. Instead, they sent their weapon of choice. A formally typed letter on their personal stationery, delivered by courier on a Tuesday morning. I read it while Marlo was at school, my coffee growing cold as I absorbed each calculated word. Dear Nadine, after considerable reflection and consultation with our financial advisors and legal counsel, we have reached several decisions regarding recent events. First, your flagrant disregard for family standards and your public association with undesirable elements has forced us to reconsider our financial arrangements. Marlo's college fund will remain intact. We are not monsters, but will be administered through a trust with specific conditions regarding acceptable institutions and behavior. Second, your inheritance has been restructured. The family properties and primary assets will pass to Prescott, who understands the responsibility of maintaining the Hutchinson legacy. Third, we require a formal written apology for the embarrassment caused to our family name, as well as immediate cessation of this Marlo's Table activity, which has attracted unwanted attention to our association with vagrancy and delinquency. These terms are non-negotiable. You have 14 days to respond. Warren and Beverly Hutchinson. I actually laughed. They'd lawyered up against their own daughter and granddaughter. But the laugh died when I realized what this meant. They were trying to use money to control Marlo's future, to dictate her choices from a distance since they couldn't do it up close. That afternoon, I did my own consulting, with Carmen, who knew about surviving without family money, and with Marcus, who understood legal intimidation tactics. By evening, I had my response. But first, I had a conversation with Marlo. They're trying to control your college choices, I told her honestly. Threatening to withhold money unless you go where they approve and behave how they want. Marlo considered this while chopping vegetables for that week's shelter dinner. What schools would they approve? Ivy League, probably. Definitely not anything with a strong social work or education program. So they'd pay for me to go to Harvard to become a lawyer but not to State to become a teacher? Essentially. She kept chopping, thoughtful. Remember what Grandma Rose used to say? Money with strings attached is just a pretty leash. God, I loved this kid. My response to my parents was brief. Beverly and Warren, no apology will be forthcoming. Marlo's Table will continue and expand. Regarding the college fund, please proceed with your restrictions. Marlo will make her own choices and find her own way, just as I did. We decline any money that comes with behavioral requirements. Your daughter by birth, not by choice, Nadine. The retaliation was swift. Within a week I received notice that they'd had me removed as Marlo's beneficiary on various insurance policies, excluded from family medical coverage, and formally disinvited from all family events until such time as appropriate amends are made. But here's what they didn't understand. They couldn't take what we'd already built. The Friday night dinners had become a cornerstone for dozens of kids. Local businesses were sponsoring ingredients. A city councilwoman had attended the previous week, not for photos but to wash dishes and learn names. They're trying to buy your life, Raven told Marlo one Friday while teaching her to French braid Aisha's hair. My parents did the same thing, told me I could come home if I stopped being gay, like my identity was a hobby I could quit. What did you do? Marlo asked. Built my own home, found my own family, learned that love shouldn't cost you pieces of yourself. The universe seemed determined to prove Raven right. As my parents tightened their grip on their money, our community opened its arms wider. Carmen offered to teach me her cleaning business's books so I could make extra income. Marcus's firm mysteriously had a part-time position open that perfectly matched my counseling schedule. Parents from school started a meal train, not out of pity but out of solidarity. They'd seen what Marlo built and wanted to support it. 3 weeks after the letter, Prescott. They want you to know the will is being rewritten. You're out completely. I'm supposed to convince you to apologize. And I think you're insane. But also, he paused. Marlo looks happy in those pictures, happier than I've ever seen her at Mom and Dad's functions. She is happy, Prescott. She's free. Must be nice, he said quietly, then hung up. I realized then that my parents hadn't just lost a daughter and granddaughter. They'd created a fortress so tight that even their chosen heir was suffocating inside it. But that was their choice, just as ours was, to build something expansive and generous and uncontrolled. The call from the mayor's office came on a Thursday morning in late spring, almost 6 months after that first birthday dinner. I almost didn't answer, too many spam calls lately. But something made me pick up. Miss Hutchinson? This is Deputy Mayor Williams. Mayor Chen would like to honor your daughter at next week's Community Leadership Awards. Marlo's table has fed over 3,000 meals and inspired similar programs in 6 other cities. The mayor believes this deserves public recognition. I sat down hard, phone pressed to my ear. The mayor wants to honor Marlo? The entire youth council voted unanimously. It's the first time someone under 18 has received the Community Builder Award. The ceremony is next Tuesday at City Hall. The mayor would like Marlo to speak about how the program started. My first thought was pride, pure, overwhelming pride. My second was, my parents are going to lose their minds. I was right. Someone from their country club must have connections at City Hall because my phone rang within 2 hours of accepting the invitation. Not my parents directly. They were still maintaining their wall of formal silence. Instead, Prescott called, sounding harried. They know about the award ceremony. Dad's planning to attend. He says if the family name is going to be associated with this, they need to be there to provide context. Context? To make sure people understand this was inspired by their values of giving back. Mom's already crafting talking points about how their charitable foundation inspired Marlo's generosity. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the phone. Their charitable foundation? The one that only funds new wings for buildings that will bear their name? I'm just warning you, Nadine. They're coming, and they're bringing reinforcements. Board members, society friends, they're going to try to claim this. They couldn't claim what they'd rejected, but I knew they'd try. People like my parents always did, swooping in when the hard work was done to plant their flag in ground they'd never helped till. The ceremony was held in the City Hall Rotunda, a space usually reserved for weddings and inaugurations. Marlo had insisted on inviting everyone who'd ever cooked or eaten at the Friday dinners. The crowd was beautifully mixed, teenagers in everything from designer clothes to thrift store finds, shelter kids sitting next to suburban parents, social workers mingling with students. I spotted my parents the moment they walked in. Beverly wore her charity gala best, diamonds catching the light. Warren had his important person face on, the one he used for business photos. They'd brought a contingent, as Prescott had warned, 6 or 7 country club fixtures, all looking slightly out of place among our deliberately unmoneyed gathering. Don't let them ruin this, Marcus murmured, squeezing my hand. But Marlo had already seen them. She was standing with Raven and Phoenix, going over her speech notes, when she spotted her grandparents. I watched her straighten, take a breath, and then do something remarkable. She smiled and waved. Not the forced smile of obligation, but something almost pitying. She'd moved beyond their power to hurt her. Mayor Chen opened the ceremony with genuine warmth, describing how Marlo's table had transformed not just Friday nights at the shelter, but the entire city's approach to youth homelessness. This young woman saw division and created connection. She took personal rejection and transformed it into radical inclusion. When Marlo took the podium, the room erupted. Teenagers stomped and cheered until she laughingly gestured for quiet. I noticed my parents shift. Beverly's smile tightening as she realized this celebration wasn't the polite golf clap affair she'd expected. 6 months ago, Marlo began, her voice clear and strong, my grandparents decided my birthday guests weren't suitable. They chose their country club over their granddaughter, and honestly, it was the best gift they could have given me. The room went silent. My parents' faces were marble. Because their rejection pushed me to find my real family. The people who taught me that worth isn't about your address or your parents' job or your grandmother's jewelry. The people who showed me that the best tables are the ones where everyone's welcome. She continued, thanking people by name. Rashid, who'd trusted a 13-year-old with his shelter kids. Carmen, who'd supervised countless cooking sessions. Each shelter kid who'd shared their story, their pain, their hope. She thanked her first family, the 20 friends who'd chosen community over comfort that night. But mostly, she said, eyes finding mine in the crowd, I want to thank my mom. She taught me that family isn't about blood or money or who approves of you. It's about who shows up, who sees you, who loves you without conditions. She never mentioned her grandparents again. Not once. And that silence said more than any confrontation could have. When the ceremony ended, my parents approached the stage where Marlo was being photographed with the mayor. Beverly's voice carried over the crowd. Marlo, darling, we're so proud of what you've accomplished. You know, your grandfather and I have always emphasized charitable giving. Hey, Raven, Marlo called out, turning away mid-sentence. Come get in this picture. You too, Phoenix. Mayor Chen, these are the people who really built Marlo's table. Without them, it would just be another charity project instead of a family. My parents stood there, dismissed as thoroughly as they'd once dismissed others, while their granddaughter gathered her chosen family for photos. Warren's face went from red to purple. Beverly's smile became a grimace. They left without speaking to me, their country club contingent trailing behind like confused ducklings. But not before I heard Beverly hiss to Warren. This is Nadine's influence, turning our granddaughter into someone who changes the world? I interrupted, appearing at her elbow. Yes, I'll take credit for that. They stormed out, heels clicking on marble, while behind us, 57 teenagers chanted, Marlo's table, Marlo's table, and the mayor asked how to expand the program statewide. A year later, I stood in the same kitchen where I'd first read my mother's text, watching Marlo prepare for the anniversary dinner. But this time she wasn't alone. Our apartment overflowed with teenagers chopping, stirring, laughing. Raven was teaching a new shelter resident named Brittany how to properly dice onions. Phoenix, now enrolled in community college thanks to tutoring from Marlo's friends, was explaining his social work admissions essay to anyone who'd listen. Silas, no longer the boy who ate alone, was confidently directing the dessert station. Ms. Nadine, Jaden called from the living room where he was tuning his guitar. You gotta hear the song I wrote for tonight. It's about choosing your family. Choosing your family. A year ago, those words would have felt like betrayal. Now they felt like truth. My phone sat silent on the counter. No more angry texts, no more lawyer letters, no more threats. My parents had finally accepted what I'd known all along. You can't control love by withholding it. You can't purchase loyalty with conditional gifts. They'd written us off completely. Prescott informed me in his monthly check-in calls that had become surprisingly warm lately. He'd started asking real questions about Marlo, about the program, about what it felt like to just not care what they think. Do you miss them? Marcus asked, appearing with a cup of tea. He'd moved back to town 3 months ago, taking a job with a local firm. Not for me. We were better as friends, but for Marlo, for this community we'd built, for Friday nights that had become the highlight of his week. I miss the idea of them, I said honestly. I miss the grandparents Marlo deserved, but the real them? No. How can you miss people who were never really there? The doorbell rang, and Tobias answered it. To my surprise, he led Mrs. Chen, Kai's grandmother, into the kitchen. She carried a worn photo album and made her way directly to me. For you, she said in careful English. You see. The album was filled with pictures of Kai, not just recent ones from Marlo's table, but going back years. A shy boy holding a science fair ribbon, the same boy, older, sadder, eating lunch alone. Then the recent photos, Kai laughing with Marlo, teaching origami to shelter kids, belonging. No friends before, Mrs. Chen said, touching a photo of lonely Kai. Now family, you and Marlo give him family. Her eyes filled with tears. My daughter, Kai's mama, she gone. I try but old, don't understand, you see him. She pressed the album into my hands and pulled out a small jade pendant on a red string. For you. Protect mother who protects all children. I accepted the gift, understanding its weight. This wasn't just a necklace, it was recognition, mother to mother, of what we'd built. The anniversary dinner that night hosted 300 people across 5 locations. What had started in our small apartment had spread to community centers, churches, and schools. Marlowe's table happened somewhere in the city every single night now, not just Fridays. The youth shelter's food insecurity had been completely eliminated. 3 other cities had launched pilot programs. A documentary filmmaker was following several kids' stories. Corporate sponsors were offering funding, carefully vetted, to ensure they understood this wasn't about photo ops, but genuine community building. But sitting in that crowded apartment, watching Marlowe glow as she served her carefully prepared food, I realized something. None of the external validation mattered. Not the mayor's award, not the media coverage, not the number of meals served. What mattered was this: a 13-year-old who'd transformed rejection into revolution, who'd learned that her worth wasn't dependent on anyone's approval, including mine. "Mom," Marlowe appeared at my elbow during a quiet moment. "I've been thinking about forgiveness." My stomach clenched. "Oh, not forgetting, not pretending it didn't hurt, but," she gestured around the room, "look what their rejection created. If they'd come to that first dinner, been polite, played along, none of this would exist. Their cruelty gave birth to something beautiful." "You're 13. When did you get so wise?" 14, she corrected with a grin. "And I learned from the best. You showed me that when people try to make you small, you can choose to expand instead." As the evening wound down, I found myself on the same balcony where I'd taken my mother's final call. The city sprawled below, lights twinkling with promise. Somewhere out there, my parents were probably at their club, surrounded by people who met their standards, but would never challenge their hearts. Prescott was probably at home, wondering what it felt like to choose authenticity over approval. And here I was, surrounded by chosen family, watching my daughter change the world one meal at a time. I'd lost an inheritance but gained something priceless: the knowledge that I was enough, had always been enough, would always be enough, regardless of who recognized. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "Miss Hutchinson, I'm a senior at Jefferson High. We've been following Marlowe's table since the beginning. My friends and I want to start a breakfast program for kids who come to school hungry. Can you help us?" I smiled, typing back, "Let's talk. Marlowe and I can meet you this weekend." Because that's what you do when you understand your worth isn't dependent on anyone's validation. You help others discover theirs. You set bigger tables. You choose expansion over constriction, connection over division, love over conditions. Looking back through the glass doors at Marlowe laughing with her enormous mismatched perfect family, I felt it. Peace. Not the peace of resolution or reconciliation, but the peace of recognition. I was Nadine Hutchinson, daughter of Beverly and Warren by birth, daughter of Grandma Rose by choice, mother of Marlowe by grace. And that was more than enough. It was everything. Have you ever had someone tell you that you weren't enough? That your friends weren't suitable, your dreams weren't practical, your love was aimed at the wrong targets? I'm betting you have. We all have in one way or another. When I shared Marlowe's story, I never expected it to resonate with so many of you. But your comments, your emails, your own stories of rejection, transformed into purpose, they've shown me that this isn't just our story, it's universal. The parent who said you'd never amount to anything. The partner who tried to shrink your world. The family who offered love with so many conditions attached, it wasn't really love at all. Here's what I've learned. Their rejection isn't about your worth, it's about their fear. Fear of a world bigger than their understanding. Fear of love that doesn't follow rules. Fear of tables where everyone's welcome because that means their exclusive seat isn't so special anymore. You get to choose what to do with that rejection. You can let it shrink you, define you, limit you. Or you can do what Marlowe did. Transform it into something bigger than they ever imagined possible. So I want to know, what's your Marlowe's table? What beautiful thing have you built from someone else's rejection? Share your story in the comments below. Let's create a community of people who chose expansion over constriction, who refused to let someone else's limitations become theirs. If Marlowe's journey resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to define success on their own terms. Someone who needs to know that the best tables are the ones where everyone's welcome, that the strongest families are the ones we choose, that worth isn't something you earn, it's something you recognize. Your seat at the table is waiting. Come as you are. You're enough.